If you step outside this habitat without a suit, you don't die in a dramatic way. You simply lose the argument with physics. Your breath boils, your blood can't hold oxygen, and the moon doesn't even notice. So here's the real question: can a city exist where every single breath is engineered, and nothing is free? I'm Rowan K. Mercer, and this is the Science Audit. Tonight is a strange word on the moon. We're arriving at a partially built lunar settlement, and you're on shift with me. Not as a tourist. Not as a dreamer. As someone responsible for keeping people alive. Mission control is a low murmur in your headset, calm voices, clipped checklists, long silences that mean the systems are behaving. Inside the habitat, the air has a faint metallic dryness to it, the smell of filters and plastics and recycled water. The walls are close enough that you can feel the pressure vessel's presence, like living inside the hull of a ship. Outside is a vacuum that's been waiting for billions of years. No wind. No birds. No microbial softness. Just dust, rock, and sunlight that hits like an unblinking eye. And if the habitat fails, the moon doesn't attack you. It simply stops preventing you from dying. That's why this question matters. Not in the abstract. Not as a sci-fi pitch deck. As a safety problem. As a systems problem. As a human problem. Because when people say city, they picture skylines and cafes and parking arguments and schools and boring municipal meetings. They picture something that can absorb mistakes. But here, every mistake is a leak. Every leak is a clock. And yet, if you zoom out far enough, every city on Earth is also an atmosphere machine we don't notice. We're born inside a pressure vessel the size of a planet. The oxygen is delivered by oceans and forests. The radiation shielding is a magnetic field and a thick blanket of air. The temperature control is weather, and the water recycling system is the entire hydrological cycle. On Earth, the life support is so old, so vast, and so automatic that we forget it's there. On the moon, you have to build it. So here's the promise of this audit. We're going to assess lunar city feasibility the way a serious safety board would. Not by asking, could it be cool? But, what must be true for this to be a permanent place? We'll walk through the systems. We'll stress test the failure modes. We'll follow the cascades, where one small problem becomes a chain of problems, and the chain becomes a tragedy. And along the way, I want you to feel something specific. Not just wonder. Responsibility. Because the moon is not a stage. It's an environment with rules. And rules don't negotiate. Now, before we get to the paradoxes, we need the baseline. The moon as it actually is. Quick tempo. Clear definitions. No romance until the numbers agree. First, vacuum. The moon has essentially no atmosphere. No atmosphere doesn't mean thin air. It means nothing to breathe, nothing to carry heat, nothing to slow down radiation, nothing to soften impacts. If you're outside, you are in the same physical category as a satellite. Second, gravity. About 1/6 of Earth's. That sounds like a perk until you remember what your body evolved for: loading bones, moving fluids, stabilizing eyes and balance, keeping muscles honest. Less gravity changes how smoke moves, how dust falls, how you lift and twist and stumble. It changes how machines wear. It changes how normal feels. Third, the day. A lunar day is about 29.5 Earth days. That means roughly 2 weeks of sunlight and 2 weeks of darkness. Not night, like we know it. No twilight. No warm breeze. Just the sun gone, the sky black, and the ground bleeding heat into space. Fourth, temperature swings. In sunlight, the surface can broil. In darkness, it can plummet. And since there's no air to smooth things out, Temperature is brutal and local. Shadow is a different world than sunlit rock 2 steps away. Fifth, radiation. 2 big categories. 1 is chronic, galactic cosmic rays, high-energy particles from beyond the solar system, passing through you like invisible shrapnel. The other is acute, solar particle events, storms from the sun that can spike radiation to dangerous levels quickly. Chronic dose is the slow corrosion. Acute dose is the sudden fire. Sixth, micrometeoroids. Tiny bits of rock and metal traveling faster than bullets. With no atmosphere, they don't burn up. They just arrive. Most are small. Small is enough. A pinhole in a pressure vessel is not dramatic until the air starts leaving. Seventh, dust. Lunar regolith is not beach sand. It's not rounded by water or wind. It's sharp, glassy, and chemically reactive because it's been blasted and fractured by impacts for eons. And it clings, electrostatically, because sunlight and plasma charge the surface. Dust is not a nuisance here. It is a system that attacks other systems. That's the environment. Now the comforting part. We already know some things work. Pressure vessels and redundancy. This is old knowledge, written in steel and laws and procedure. The International Space Station is a masterclass in keeping humans alive inside a hostile void. Submarines do it under crushing pressure. Clean rooms do it against invisible contamination. The logic is the same. You assume components fail, and you design so failure is survivable. Regolith shielding, covering habitats with lunar soil, piling it into berms, burying modules. This is not elegant, but it's honest. Radiation protection, micrometeoroid protection, thermal buffering, mass is your friend. The moon offers you unlimited mass. The trick is moving it. Power. Solar works, but solar is a mood swing if you're not careful. 2 weeks of feast, 2 weeks of famine unless you're at a special location. Batteries help. Fuel cells help. But for a settlement that wants to survive the long night without living in terror of the power meter, you start thinking about nuclear fission. Not because it's trendy. Because baseload power is a form of psychological safety. Water recycling and life support. We can scrub carbon dioxide. We can reclaim water from air and waste. We can grow plants. We can do closed-loop life support increasingly well. But here's a crucial truth. 100% recycling is asymptotic. It's like trying to reach the horizon by walking. You can get closer and closer, but perfect closure is a myth because systems leak, react, degrade, and require replacement. Modular construction and incremental expansion. You don't land a city. You land a seed that can survive, then you add organs. You build one pressure volume, then a second. Then you connect them. You learn. You repair. You iterate. Now, what does the moon give us? It's not generous, but it is not empty. Oxygen exists bound inside the regolith, locked in minerals. Water ice may exist in permanently shadowed regions near the poles, trapped like ancient treasure in cold darkness. The geology is stable, no weather, no rain, no rusting storms. And at certain polar peaks, there are ridges that get sunlight for most of the year, like places that barely ever turn their face away from the sun. So the raw materials are there. But the moon doesn't hand them to you. It makes you earn them. And now we slow down. Because here's where the first real, moment lands in your body. In an Earth city, systems can fail quietly. A pipe breaks, water reroutes. A substation trips, power shifts. A hospital has backup generators. The environment is forgiving. It gives you time. On the moon, every system couples to every other. Coupling is a cold word, so let me translate. It means everything touches everything. Heat isn't just comfort. Heat is power. Heat is water. Heat is structure. Heat is survival. You feel it during your shift. A temperature alarm pings, and suddenly you're not thinking about temperature. You're thinking about the radiator loop, which affects power draw, which affects battery margins, which affects oxygen generation, which affects crew workload, which affects human error probability, which affects everything. So let's run the audit's core paradoxes. Not as a list on a slide. As scenarios you can smell and hear. Paradox number 1. Pressure versus volume. Everyone wants big domes. Big domes look like a city. Big domes feel like freedom. But a bigger pressurized volume means more surface area that has to hold back the vacuum. It means more seams, more joints, more square meters where a defect could exist. Micrometeoroids don't care if your architecture is inspirational. They care how much target you present. And here's the uncomfortable scaling. As time passes, the probability of something happening approaches certainty. Not because you're unlucky, because you're alive long enough. A small base can be inspected obsessively. A city has too much skin. And skin is where the world gets in. So you start thinking differently. Instead of one big balloon, you want many smaller ones. Compartments. Bulkheads. A city that can be wounded without bleeding out. Paradox number 2. Dust as a system killer. You come back from an EVA, an extravehicular activity, and the airlock looks clean until you shine a light at the right angle. Then you see it, a faint haze of gray on surfaces, in corners, in the folds of fabric. Lunar dust is jagged like crushed glass. It abrades seals. It scratches visors. It creeps into bearings. It coats radiators, and radiators are how you dump waste heat into space. In vacuum, you can't cool yourself by blowing air over a hot surface. You cool by radiating infrared light, like glowing without the visible glow. Dust fouls that. It also degrades optics, solar panels, sensors, camera lenses, light or windows. And toxicity matters too. Fine particles can lodge in lungs, trigger inflammation, act like a long-term irritant. Here's the thing people miss. Dust isn't just a housekeeping problem. Dust is an adversary that grows stronger as you expand, because every vehicle movement, every landing, every footstep stirs it. So the city begins with rituals, cleaning protocols, suit ports that keep suits outside, airlocks that treat dust like biohazard. The first law of lunar urban planning might be, keep the moon outside. Paradox number 3. Radiation isn't one thing. If radiation were just a bad thing, we'd slap on a shield and call it a day. But radiation is a spectrum of threats. Chronic galactic cosmic rays are deeply penetrating. They are so energetic that if you put dense shielding in the wrong configuration, you can create secondary particle showers, like turning one bullet into many fragments. Then there are solar particle events, storms where particle flux can jump dramatically. Those you can shelter from with mass. If you have a storm shelter, water tanks around a core room, regolith pile thick, a place to retreat when the sun gets angry. But you can't engineer away radiation without mass, and mass is expensive to deliver from Earth. So again, you're pushed toward burying habitats, using lunar material, digging trenches, building under regolith. Your city becomes subterranean not because it's dystopian, but because physics makes it economical. Paradox number 4. Thermal extremes and the 2-week night. In sunlight, your problem is rejecting heat. Your electronics run, your people live, and the sun pours energy in. In darkness, your problem is not freezing and not losing power. Inside a habitat, you produce waste heat constantly: bodies, computers, pumps, lights, chemical reactions. On Earth, waste heat can leak into air, into the ground, into wind. On the moon, there's only conduction through structure and radiation to space. Radiators are your external lungs. They breathe heat out as infrared light. But radiators can't be too warm, because then the inside overheats, and can't be too cold, because then your coolant freezes. And they can't be too dusty, because then they stop working. Now add the 2-week night. If you rely on solar alone at a typical site, you must store enough energy to survive half a month. That's not a battery problem. That's a civilization architecture problem. So the settlement starts looking toward the poles. Places with near constant sunlight reduce the night from an existential threat to a manageable engineering case. Paradox number 5. The tyranny of logistics. Every kilogram you send to the moon is a design decision locked in metal and propellant. On Earth, if a valve fails, you order a new one. On the moon, you ask, do we have it? Can we make it? Can we repair it? Can we improvise? Spare parts aren't inventory. They are memory. They are the physical record of everything you know will go wrong. And maintenance isn't a chore. Maintenance is destiny. The settlement that wins is not the one with the sleekest renderings. It's the one that can keep the pumps running for 10 years. Paradox number 6. Fire in a pressure habitat. This one is visceral because it's not theoretical. We've had fires in spacecraft. We've learned, sometimes painfully, that oxygen is not just life. Oxygen is fuel. In a sealed habitat, you choose your atmosphere, total pressure, oxygen fraction, nitrogen buffer, or other inert gases. The safest atmosphere is not necessarily Earth-like, because fire risk depends on oxygen partial pressure and materials. A lower total pressure with higher oxygen fraction can be breathable but changes flammability and how materials burn. Smoke behavior changes in reduced gravity. On Earth, smoke rises because hot air is buoyant. In low gravity, convection is weaker. Smoke can form strange layers. Flames can be spherical, stubborn, harder to predict. So you design for containment, compartments, quick isolation, fire breaks, sensors everywhere, materials chosen like you're building a cathedral inside a matchbox. Paradox number 7. Human factors. Even if every system is engineered perfectly, which it won't be, you still have the human nervous system operating under stress. Circadian disruption is real when day and night are artificial and your body's ancient clock is confused. Isolation changes cognition. Alarm fatigue is a quiet killer. Too many alerts and the brain starts triaging badly. And there's something deeper. Tightly coupled systems create what safety scientists call normal accidents. That phrase sounds cynical, so here's the metaphor. When your systems are like a web, a tug on one strand can ripple unpredictably. In complex environments, accidents aren't always someone's fault. They can be a property of the system. So the city must be designed to forgive humans. Clear procedures. Training that becomes muscle memory. Interfaces that don't lie. A culture where reporting near misses is honored, not punished. At this point in the shift, you might feel a strange tightening in your chest, not fear exactly, but the realization that building a city is not the central challenge. Keeping it alive is. And that brings us to the edge question, one that sounds simple until you try to answer it. At what point does a base become a city? Not when it has more people. Not when it has a bigger dome. A base becomes a city when it can fail, repair itself, and keep going without Earth on a tight schedule. When resupply ships are helpful, not mandatory. When a broken pump doesn't trigger panic, because the settlement has redundancy, tools, spare parts, and the ability to fabricate replacements. When the culture of maintenance is so embedded that a child growing up there understands filters the way Earth kids understand weather. And here, quietly, you reach the eureka moment. Not fireworks. More like a lens clicking into focus. A lunar city is less like building a town and more like building a living organism. It needs skin, pressure shells and dust barriers. It needs metabolism, power generation, heat rejection, oxygen production, water cycling. It needs an immune system, sensors, alarms, compartmentalization, emergency shelters, repair capability. And it needs memory, procedures, training, spare parts, and the stories of past failures that keep future people alive. Once you see it that way, the pathway becomes clearer, not easy, but legible. So what would actually work? Let's stop fantasizing and start designing. First, start at the poles. Not because the poles are romantic, but because they're strategic. Near the lunar poles, there may be water ice and permanently shadowed craters, places so cold they preserve molecules like a freezer that never turns off. And nearby, there are ridges with long-duration sunlight. That means simpler power, more stable thermal conditions, fewer brutal transitions. It's the closest thing the moon offers to a gentle place. Second, build underground or regolith covered by default. If you take one lesson from every hard environment humans have ever inhabited, it's this: use the environment as a shield. On the moon, moving dirt, regolith, is cheaper than launching shielding from Earth once you have the machines to do it. Bury modules. Cover habitats with berms. Dig trenches. Use sintered regolith, basically microwaving dust into a solid, into bricks or landing pads. The aesthetic changes. You might not get gleaming domes at first. You get something more honest, a settlement that looks like it's hugging the ground for survival. Third, nuclear plus solar hybrid power. Solar is phenomenal when it's available. It's quiet, scalable, and uses no fuel shipments once installed. But reliability matters more than peak efficiency. A fission reactor provides steady baseline power. Life support doesn't care about dawn. Communications don't care about eclipse. Heating and industrial processes don't pause because the sun dipped behind a ridge. Hybrid systems also create resilience. If one fails, the other carries you. That's not just engineering. It's psychological oxygen. Fourth, closed-loop life support with open-loop humility. You push recycling hard, because every kilogram saved is freedom. But you don't worship the fantasy of total closure. You accept losses and design for them. Resupply, yes, but also local production. You size your systems assuming filters clog, membranes degrade, seals age, microbes behave unexpectedly, and human behavior isn't always optimal. Because the goal isn't to prove perfection. The goal is to keep breathing. Fifth, industrial bootstrap. This is the hinge between outpost and city. A city makes things. Start with oxygen extraction from regolith. It's energetically expensive, but oxygen is heavy to ship and vital for breathing and propulsion. Process water, if you have ice, into drinking supply, radiation shielding, and rocket propellant. Develop metals and glass and ceramics. Use regolith for building blocks. Use local materials for radiation mass, for roads and landing pads, for structural shells that protect delicate pressure vessels inside. Every step of local manufacturing is a step away from logistical tyranny. Sixth, city design as fault containment. This one is almost moral. You design the city assuming something will go wrong. You create compartments that can be isolated in seconds. Independent life support zones so a leak doesn't become an extinction event. Fire breaks. Pressure doors. Redundant corridors. Safe rooms with extra air and water. You don't build one big community that shares one set of lungs. You build a community of neighborhoods, each capable of survival while repairs happen. And if you're listening closely, you'll notice what's happening. This city is becoming less like a piece of architecture and more like a philosophy of resilience. Because permanence isn't the same as presence. You can visit the moon. People have. Robots do it routinely. A city is different. A city is a promise to the future. So here's the philosophical takeaway, grounded, not sentimental. A lunar city would be the clearest mirror of what a city truly is, an agreement between physics and community. On Earth, we inherit that agreement. We didn't vote to have an atmosphere. We didn't earn a magnetic field. We didn't build the oceans. We woke up inside a working life support system and called it nature. On the Moon, you must write the agreement line by line. Every valve is a paragraph. Every maintenance shift is a signature. Every emergency drill is a clause that says, we intend to keep each other alive. Now I want to bring you back to the human scale, because that's where this stops being a technical exercise and becomes a question about who we are. Picture it, a child born in that settlement. They've never felt wind. They've never heard rain on a roof. They've never stepped outside without a layer of engineering between their lungs and the void. What does home mean to them? Do they think of Earth as the ancestral planet, the unreachable blue myth in the sky? Or do they feel something sharper, a gratitude that borders on grief, for a world where you can walk outside and breathe for free? And then the forward-looking question opens like a door you can't unsee. If we can build a city where nature offers no mercy, what does that teach us about keeping the only city that already works, Earth? Because Earth is the original closed-loop life support system, and we are stress testing it in real time. The Moon doesn't forgive mistakes, but Earth doesn't either. Earth just takes longer to send the invoice. So here's the synthesis of what we've learned on this shift together. A lunar city is physically possible, but it will not be built by optimism. It will be built by redundancy, mass shielding, dust discipline, reliable power, and an industrial base that slowly breaks the chain of dependence. The first things to fail won't be the dramatic ones. They'll be seals, filters, radiators, human attention, and the quiet compounding of small neglects. And the settlements that endure will treat maintenance as culture, not labor. Now take this with you as a thought experiment, one you can run in your own life. Imagine you had a personal life support budget. Every day, you must account for air, water, heat, waste, and repair. Nothing is free. Every leak is visible. Every shortcut has a measurable cost. Would you live differently? Would you value the invisible systems that keep you alive, both the mechanical ones and the social ones? And then, one more question, the next door. If time on the Moon is chopped into 2-week extremes of light and darkness, and your day is an artificial schedule inside a sealed habitat, what does that do to memory? To identity? To the stories a culture tells itself when nature is no longer the shared clock? If you want to keep going, I've placed another investigation on the end screen that takes this same audit mindset and pushes it into a new frontier. Click it and stay in the thread. And I want to hear from you, simple question, no wrong answers. If you had to choose one system to overbuild on a lunar city, power, radiation shielding, or spare parts manufacturing, which one would you bet your life on, and why? If you're new here, subscribe for a clear reason. We don't do science as trivia on this channel. We do it as a reality check, so you can see what's true, what's possible, and what it costs. I'll see you in the next audit.